All right, so you're a designer, and it's 2025. You've got this big project coming up, and you're trying to decide, okay, which tool am I going to use for this? Is it going to be Figma, or is it going to be OBXE? Well, lucky for you, we've got this really interesting Medium article that came out just last month in December 2024. And it does a really great job of breaking down these two platforms, comparing them, and we're going to kind of extract all the juicy bits that are going to matter the most to you as a designer, trying to make this really
Exactly. We're not just going to, list out all the features. We're going to really dive into, okay, what are the implications of these features? How might they fit into your specific workflow?
Yeah.
How do they actually work in the real world?
Yeah. So let's start by defining our players here. In this corner, we have Figma, which is known as this kind of cloud-based collaborative design darling. What is it about Figma that makes it so unique in this design tool landscape?
Yeah, it's really that cloud-based nature that sets it apart. You can imagine working on a website design with a developer and a copywriter.
Yeah.
All at the same time. Each seeing the changes that the other is making in real time.
Yeah.
That's the power of Figma.
So no more sending files back and forth, waiting for feedback. It's all just instant.
Yeah. For many teams, it's a game changer, especially for folks who are working remotely. But, it does require a stable internet connection, which could be a challenge in certain situations.
That's a good point. So are there any downsides to that then? If you are completely offline, is Figma just like useless at that point?
Well, Figma does offer an offline mode where you can view and make light edits.
Okay, so it's not a total deal breaker if you're
occasionally offline.
Okay.
So that's Figma. Our other contender here is Adobe XD. And one of the things that it's known for is being vector-based and being very integrated with the Adobe suite. So can you just break down what that means for someone who's choosing a design tool? Yeah, so vector-based means that essentially your designs will remain crisp and clear, no matter how much you zoom in or scale them. This is really crucial for creating those high-quality designs that look sharp across various devices and screen sizes, and the integration with other Adobe apps like Photoshop and Illustrator. If you're already using those tools, that's a huge time saver. You can easily import and export assets and keep everything really smooth in your workflow.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, especially if you're already someone who's working within that Adobe ecosystem. So we've got Figma, the cloud-based collaboration king, versus Adobe XD, the vector-based Adobe integrated powerhouse. So now, let's dive a little bit deeper into some of the features that might sway you one way or the other. So Figma has this feature called auto layout. And I know as a designer, you probably, a love-hate relationship with layouts. Break this down for me. What is it about Figma's auto layout that is so special?
It's like having a personal assistant for your layouts. It takes the pain out of resizing and rearranging elements by automatically adjusting the spacing and the alignment. So imagine you're designing like a mobile app menu. As you add or remove menu items, the layout just dynamically adapts. So it can save you a lot of time and frustration.
That sounds like a dream for someone like me who spends way too much time fiddling with, pixel perfect alignment. But is there anything about auto layout that's not so great? Does it limit you in terms of your design freedom at all?
That's a great question. It is incredibly helpful. But there is a bit of a learning curve to understanding its constraints and settings. Once you get the hang of it, though, it can be a huge productivity booster.
Got it. So powerful, but maybe not as intuitive as just dragging and dropping freely. Okay, now on the Adobe XD side, there's this feature called Auto Animate that seems to be generating a lot of buzz. What's the big deal about it?
Auto Animate is a game changer for creating micro interactions and animations. So let's say you're designing an onboarding flow for an app. Instead of painstakingly creating each animation, frame by frame. You can simply duplicate an artboard, make a few changes, and Auto Animate will automatically generate that transition between the two states.
Whoa, so it just does it for you. That sounds amazing. I'm wondering, though, is there ever a risk of overusing animation? As a designer, I want to make sure that I'm using it strategically and not just for the sake of flashy effects.
But still, animation should always serve a purpose, whether it's guiding the user, providing feedback, or enhancing that overall experience. With Auto Animate, it can be very tempting to go a little overboard, but thoughtful restraint is key to creating those elegant and effective animations.
Okay, so we've got Figma's time-saving auto layout and Adobe XD's sleek Auto Animate. Both sound incredibly useful, but it sounds like they also require a bit of finesse to use effectively.
Definitely. Like any powerful tool, there is a learning curve and a need for thoughtful application. But that's why we're doing this deep dive. We're going to help you figure out, okay, which of these features would actually be the most valuable in your specific design process.
Right. Okay, and speaking of valuable features, we can't forget about plugins. Figma's plugin library seems to be a big draw for designers. Can you give me an example of a game-changing plugin that might be relevant to our listeners' work?
Absolutely. Let's say you work with a lot of data visualization. There's this Figma plugin called Charts that lets you import data directly from spreadsheets and create beautiful, interactive charts right within your design. No more switching back and forth between tools or manually recreating charts.
That sounds incredibly useful, especially for anyone working with those data-heavy designs. So Figma's got a plugin for practically anything you can think of, right? Are there any downsides to having this vast plugin ecosystem?
Well, it is a huge advantage, that extensive plugin library. But it can sometimes be overwhelming to sift through all the options. And because they're created by third-party developers, there's always a slight risk of compatibility issues or plugins becoming outdated.
Right. So immense power and flexibility, but also the potential for complexity and occasional glitches.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to consider your needs and your workflow when you're evaluating these features.
Okay, so we've covered some of the standout features of both platforms, but I'm wondering, what are some of the less obvious strengths that might not be immediately apparent just from a feature list? What makes these tools really shine in real-world design scenarios?
One thing that often gets overlooked is the community aspect. Both Figma and Adobe XD have these vibrant communities of designers who are sharing resources and tutorials and support, which can be invaluable when you're learning the ropes or tackling a challenging design problem.
Yeah, having access to that supportive community can make a huge difference in your learning journey and your overall design experience.
Definitely. And both platforms are constantly evolving, adding new features and improvements based on user feedback. So something feels like a limitation today. It might be addressed in a future update.
Right, yeah. So it sounds like both Figma and Adobe XD have a lot to offer. We've got cloud-based collaboration versus seamless Adobe integration, powerful layout tools, game-changing animation features, and thriving communities. But how do we sift through all this information and figure out which platform is actually the best fit for our listeners' specific needs?
I think that's where the fun begins. Let's move on to kind of a head-to-head comparison where we're going to delve a little bit deeper into the pros and cons of each platform and help you make an informed decision.
All right, stay tuned as we unpack the details that really matter and help you choose the perfect design tool for your 2025 project.
Okay, so we're going to get into this head-to-head comparison now. And you had mentioned earlier that you're a little bit hesitant about Figma's reliance on an internet connection. Is that still a major concern for you in 2025?
Yeah. I mean, I travel a lot for work. I'm not always in a place with super reliable internet, or I find myself offline sometimes. So while the real-time collaboration sounds really amazing, I'm not sure how practical that would be for me in my actual workflow.
Yeah, I hear that. I think, stable internet access.
Yeah.
It's definitely still a challenge in some areas, even in 2025. But Figma has been actively working on improving their offline functionality. You can now access and edit basic files offline. And they're constantly working on expanding those capabilities.
Okay, so it's not a total showstopper if I need to work offline every once in a while. But what about large, complex files? I've heard that Figma can sometimes struggle with performance when dealing with those.
That's definitely a valid concern. Figma's performance can be impacted by file size and the number of collaborators who are working simultaneously. But they've made significant strides in optimizing their platform for handling those larger files. Plus, they offer features like component libraries and design systems, which can help to streamline your workflow and improve performance, even with those complex designs.
So it sounds like Figma is aware of these potential limitations, and they're trying to, actively work on addressing them. Okay, let's switch gears for a sec, over to Adobe XD. One of the things that really appeals to me about Adobe XD is its seamless integration with the Adobe Creative Suite. I'm already using Photoshop and Illustrator, so being able to move effortlessly between those apps. And XD sounds like a huge time saver.
It's definitely a major advantage for anyone already working within that Adobe ecosystem.
Yeah.
So you can imagine you're creating a website mock-up in XD, and you need to refine an illustration. You can just pop over to Illustrator, make your edits, and those changes will automatically update in your XD file.
That's so convenient. But how does collaboration work in Adobe XD? Is it really that much weaker compared to Figma?
Well, Adobe XD has definitely made improvements to its collaboration features. It is true that Figma still has the edge in that department. Figma's real-time collaboration is just unmatched. It allows multiple users to work on the same file at the same time with seamless version control. But Adobe XD does offer co-editing, which allows for asynchronous collaboration.
Got it. So if real-time collaboration is a must-have for my team, then Figma is the clear winner.
But if we're working independently
and
just need to share files occasionally, then maybe Adobe XD's co-editing would be sufficient.
Yeah, it really just comes down to understanding your collaboration needs and choosing the tool that aligns with those.
Okay, so let's talk about pricing for a second. Figma has a pretty generous free plan, but Adobe XD requires a Creative Cloud subscription. So how do those pricing models factor into the decision-making process? Cost is definitely a crucial consideration. Figma's free plan is fantastic for individuals and small teams who need those basic features and collaboration. But if you need more advanced features or have a larger team, you'll need to upgrade to a paid plan. Adobe XD, on the other hand, is only available as part of that Creative Cloud subscription, which could be a pro or a con, depending on your existing software usage, if you're already using other Adobe apps like Photoshop or Illustrator. Adding XD to your subscription might make sense, but if you're only interested in using XD, a standalone subscription could be expensive.
Right. So you've got to kind of weigh Figma's enticing free plan versus the potential benefits of Adobe XD's integration with the Creative Suite.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, you mentioned earlier that learning curves can be a factor when choosing a design tool. So how do Figma and Adobe XD compare in terms of ease of use? For beginners,
I think Figma is generally considered more intuitive and user-friendly. For beginners, it has a clean, modern interface and a wealth of tutorials and resources to help you get started. Adobe XD has also made efforts to simplify its interface and make it more approachable for newcomers.
Okay, but what about more advanced features? Do both platforms offer similar levels of depth and complexity for, more experienced designers?
They both do. Figma and Adobe XD are packed with powerful features. For seasoned designers, Figma's auto layout and its vast plugin ecosystem provide a lot of flexibility and customization. And Adobe XD's auto animate and its integration with other Adobe apps make it really powerful for creating those sophisticated designs and animations.
Okay, so it sounds like both platforms can cater to a wide range of skill levels, from beginners to seasoned pros. But I'm wondering, beyond these, core features and functionality, are there any hidden gems or lesser-known aspects of these tools that might surprise our listeners?
One often overlooked aspect is the focus on accessibility. Both Figma and Adobe XD have incorporated features that make it easier to design inclusive experiences. For users with disabilities, for example, they both offer tools for checking color contrast, ensuring keyboard navigability, and adding alternative text to images.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think it's so important for designers to be thinking about creating designs that are accessible to everyone. So it's great to see that these platforms are
prioritizing inclusivity.
Definitely. Another aspect that I think is often underappreciated is the power of prototyping. Both Figma and Adobe XD allow you to create interactive prototypes that simulate the user experience, which is really invaluable for testing and refining your designs before handing them off to developers. Right. So we've really gone beyond just comparing features and really explored the nuances of these two platforms, from offline capabilities and performance to pricing and learning curves, and even accessibility and prototyping. It's clear that both Figma and Adobe XD have a lot to offer, but I think it's time now to kind of shift gears a little bit and think
for the bigger picture.
Yeah, because choosing a design tool isn't just about individual preferences. It can have kind of a ripple effect across entire teams and organizations.
Exactly. So let's explore how the choice of Figma versus Adobe XD might actually impact larger design teams and organizations in this dynamic landscape of 2025. Okay, so we've been talking about Figma and Adobe XD, mostly from the perspective of like an individual designer. But for this deep dive, I kind of want to think bigger. Okay, so let's say you're leading a design team, or you're making these decisions that are going to affect your entire organization. How does the choice of design tool play out on that scale? Yeah, that's a really important consideration. You can imagine a team of 10, 20, even 50 designers all working on different aspects of a massive project. Consistency and collaboration just becomes so important.
Yeah, it wouldn't be very efficient if like half the team was using Figma for its real-time collaboration features, while the other half was stuck emailing Adobe XD files back and forth.
Exactly. In that scenario, I think it's really important to choose a single platform that supports the team's workflow and collaboration style. So if real-time collaboration is really a top priority, then Figma's cloud-based approach
Okay.
would likely be the more efficient choice. But if the team primarily works asynchronously and they value that deep integration with other Adobe tools, then Adobe XD might be a better fit.
So it's not just about individual designer preferences
That's right.
anymore, right? You're talking about like a potential shift in an organization's entire design culture.
Totally. And that shift needs to be carefully considered. I think it's so important to involve the entire design team in that decision-making process. So gather feedback, conduct trials of both platforms, and see what resonates best with the teams. Needs and work styles.
It sounds like there's no one-size-fits-all answer here.
Definitely not.
It really depends on the specific needs and priorities of that organization.
For sure.
And beyond. Just the design team. It's important to think about how this choice might impact other departments, like how are developers going to access and work with those design files? Will marketing teams be able to easily extract assets?
Yeah, all really great points. You're talking about integration across the organization, not just within. A design summit.
Right. It's a much bigger decision than just picking a tool for a single project.
Exactly. It's really important to consider those long-term implications. So think about, how will this choice affect onboarding new team members? What about future software updates and compatibility issues?
So you need to be thinking really strategically here, not just about the immediate needs, but also about the potential impact on the organization's workflow and future growth.
Totally.
So I think, as we're wrapping up this deep dive into Figma and Adobe XD, the big takeaway here is there is no single best tool.
I completely agree. The best tool is the one that fits the specific needs and context of the individual designer, the team, or the organization.
So to our listeners out there, I really encourage you to experiment, explore both platforms, and see which one feels like a natural extension
of your creative process that aligns with your long-term goals.
Remember, the design landscape is constantly evolving. Stay curious, stay creative, and never stop learning.
That is a fantastic note to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the ever-fascinating world of design tools. We hope you've gained some valuable insights.
So happy making
more informed decisions and navigate the future of design
with confidence. Until next time, happy designing.